All right, okay, so let's kick off. We have 125-pound fighter defeated a 284-pound brown belt super guy in a jiu-jitsu match. We've got some exciting stuff on the docket. How the hell did the guy half his size win the match? We've got some breaking news with Khamzat Chimaev and his new fight. We've got a lot of crazy stuff going on today's podcast. So, Lim, you watched this as a guy that enjoys jiu-jitsu a bit. You've seen this fight. Yep. What I want to break down specifically is how did MightyMouse beat a guy that's double his size? Yeah. What impressed you about that? And actually, how can other people, when they're fighting larger opponents, bottle that and take it to get that W?
Absolutely. Tiny little tangent before we dive straight into that is, I just loved how much fun MightyMouse is having. Like, he just seems like such a genuine, cool dude, man.
He is, bro. He's everywhere now. He's everywhere.
Absolutely. And his opponent as well, kudos to that guy, because he seemed just genuinely happy that MightyMouse got to put on that performance and was so happy. Like, MightyMouse technically did some real black belt stuff. Whoever's MightyMouse coach, come on, son, give that man a black belt. I mean, how many flag arm bars do you need?
Would it be a black belt under your tutelage at this point?
Makes me sound like I'm talking to myself. Yes, of course, I'd give MightyMouse a black belt. I mean, look at what he's done. But so in terms of the things that impressed me the most and the things that managed to secure him that win, the thing that really impressed me was, first of all, if you're the lighter guy and you're fighting that giant heavyweight, do you want to be on top or bottom?
You want to be on top 100%.
All the time. But the risk is getting that giant guy down. So in my mind, majority of the work when you're that speedy and you're that technical is getting that guy to the floor where you end up on top and you don't end up crushed under 284 pounds. So how did MightyMouse do this? Well, first of all, he was not looking for the takedown. He was looking for the off balance. And this is something that's so critical when it comes to making your takedowns and many of your sort of martial arts techniques work. He picked up the single leg. He ran the pipe with the single leg, looking to create this off balance. And once he sensed that off balance, he turned the single leg into a double leg. And one of the things that we talk about in the academy a lot of the time is very hard to finish a single leg against somebody very good because, first of all, it's just tough with the balance. And second of all, they're going to pop straight back up. So switching it to a double leg was inspired. And then, of course, as soon as it hit the floor, he had to deal with 284 pounds of bench press and keep his balance. And he has, by my eyes, some of the best balance in the game.
And not just 284 pounds, a 284-pound brown belt who's also a competition brown belt, who's also wants to get a W against MightyMouse on his record. So, yeah, exactly. So there's no way he didn't arrive there with 100%. So it's funny because one of my wrestling coaches said that if you're the bigger guy, I forgot his analogy, I'm going to butcher his analogy brutally here, but his idea was you either play the bear and use the strength of your assets, or if you're the smaller guy, I don't know if it was like a wolf or something, but basically you almost go into that, if there's a big size discrepancy, you have to understand your assets and where you're weaker and actually change your game plan completely based on what that looks like.
I couldn't agree more. And that's actually something that we talk about in sparring when obviously like weight classes exist for a reason. Got to put that caveat in there. However, if you're sparring and you ask a big guy not to use strength, if you're the smaller guy, are you not going to use speed? You know, when it comes to these attributes, you really have to play to your strengths. And as the smaller guy, MightyMouse did that. Extraordinarily dynamic, excellent movement, constant off balances and constant movement. Like if you're fighting that guy and you manage to get his leg up off the floor, for the love of God, you cannot let him settle back down into 2 feet on the floor, nice and comfy. And again, it's inspired that he switched it to double leg because if I'm going to compromise your base, switching it to a double leg allows me control of both of the pillars that connect you to the floor. So he went from single legs off balances, switches to his double leg, and runs him over. And again, beautiful. Once he hits the floor, there's a little bit of a flow, a little bit of an exchange, and MightyMouse eventually finds himself attacking the turtle. And this is something that kind of blew my mind for 2 reasons. What happened was MightyMouse gets himself a collar grip, he throws himself over the top and uses a pendulum swing to turn over a 284 pound. It seemed like he got stuck for a split second, then off he goes, and he wins by submission. Now, the thing that really blew my mind about that is, first of all, that he managed to achieve it in the first place, and secondly, like I think he weighed in at 154 pounds. 54 pounds of that has got to be balls, man, because honestly, to have that level of confidence to throw yourself into a pendulum sweep when the guy's nearly twice your size, like that's why I'm so adamant that that's probably a black belt performance.
So for the viewers out there whose balls are maybe 20 pounds versus 54 pounds,
understandable.
What's the strategy? So because what I'm hearing you say is basically it's a lot in chaining. In other words, it can't be explosive single file movements. No. You need to be thinking, create a reaction to the reaction, and every reaction to the reaction you create your leverage increases and you're more likely to complete the takedown. So you need to be very deep knowledge trees through which you can execute a moveset across.
Absolutely, and you need reactivity to recognize when certain doors are opening, when certain doors are closing. And the thing again is like MightyMouse was so dynamic, so comfortable to change his attack patterns that he was never really under threat. Like you never saw in that match, like him fending off a cross collar choke or him, having to deal with a repass or a regard or anything else along those lines. What MightyMouse really did well was kept the pace, kept the dynamic movement, and kept the chains where he never stayed too long in one position to give the guy a chance to consolidate and actually start to do some jiu-jitsu. And when we talk about that attribute-based game, that level of quick decision making, that's why he was the GOAT or is the GOAT or however you want to see it, but that is what I think also led him to being a world-class MMA fighter, because he had the ability to think quickly and overwhelm his opponent's nervous system.
So I've got a couple of things I think we should iron out here. Number one is, how much of that win was his jiu-jitsu skill level, and how much of it was his championship mentality versus his physicality and his processing speed?
I think it'd be very hard to argue any real physicality advantage.
Yeah, but his explosiveness, his speed, absolutely. His athleticism.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the process that he's working through mentally there, he's so clearly in reptile mode. Do you understand? Like he as he's like engaging in that, like he's really in flow. You can see that there's not a lot of thought happening. There was no second guess of that roll to the bow and arrow type pendulum.
He could have a 30 IQ and it felt like he would have done that all the way through. It was like
absolutely complete autopilot, which again is really how you have to be in competition. And that's something that, when you're talking about the jiu-jitsu skills versus that sort of championship mentality, well, the championship mentality is pure unadulterated confidence in what you've got to be able to bring to the table and no second guessing. There's not a single second against somebody who's nearly twice your weight that you could spend thinking and processing what it is you need to do. It's just action, reaction, action, reaction.
And then let's also touch on grappling strategy for our viewers, because I guess when you're thinking of my experience rolling with guys, which obviously less than your experience, but when they're 30, 40 kilograms heavier than you, I've learned the hard way that you're not going for head and arm triangles. You're basically focusing your attacks, if you can, around the neck. 100%. And it's like, so I guess MightyMouse got with the bow and arrow choke, which is like a feature of the gi. Yep. Do you think, how does this fight change if it's no gi? Would you see MightyMouse working more towards the back for single R and C? And
yeah, I know this is going to sound a bit strange, but like, if the fight is no gi, then, and I'm MightyMouse's coach and he's going to take that match, then honestly, I see that as a decision. You know what I mean? Because the gi is something that obviously I can get an extended loop around the neck. I can find that from turtle. I can find it from all sorts of different positions. The ability to choke you with your own material takes away a little bit of that need to find a fully closed loop around the neck. And if you think about it, like anything short of an absolutely perfect choke, either a rear naked or a guillotine, is pretty much the only way that you're going to deal with somebody like twice the size of you. Really, I mean, like even things like heel hooks if they put the boot on, but arm submissions, things like this. You're dealing with somebody who's so strong there. Yes, you must absolutely attack the neck and try and attack that. But short of a guillotine and a rear naked, which again, it's very, very hard to. How does MightyMouse even climb up the back to get to a rear naked? Do you know what I mean? If he puts his legs around, they're higher than the dude's belly button.
I know, yeah. Like even if he's getting the arm drag around there, it's like, how's he doing that? And I guess with the guillotine attacks against a heavy guy in no gi, if you don't get the guillotine, like what position? He's probably going to be in the worst position right off the back of the guillotine, no matter where he attacks it from.
And even
he has to compromise.
The back and the rear naked, the risk of somebody being able to turn out of that and you not having the space or the freedom to be able to take top position again. Actually, a lot of the times, even with the guys in our MMA gym with MMA, if a guy turns his back and he's belly down, we're going to keep striking, hop off to the side, and unless he gives you two hooks completely for free so you can take the back, we're not going to take it, because the risk of being shaken off and landing in a worse position where you're vulnerable to ground and pound or top pressure is fairly analogous to that giant size difference. Because if MightyMouse goes for the back, tries to get the rear naked, the guy's just hulking out, maybe he puts one hand in to fight the wrist, and that lat row at 284 pounds might be enough to just stop what MightyMouse has got to give. If that guy managed to shake him off and ends up on top, it's not just the risk of a loss, but you might even be risking injury at that point.
And it's actually a good point that you make, because he didn't try to sit the hooks in, and get the choke from the back. He went straight for the pendulum sweep.
Absolutely.
It's just a testament to his fight IQ and how he's thinking about the match and stuff.
Fantastic decision. I mean, it's clearly a fantastic decision. I mean, because again, if you say, okay, right, this match hasn't happened yet. MightyMouse is now going to go face this giant guy. Like, what options does he have to finish the fight? That's it, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
I don't think I would have come back with that. I wouldn't have come back with that.
Very tough to think of something like. I mean, he's not. I think he'll just like run through a bunch. Like obviously no heel, but straight foot locks. Nah, do you know what I mean? Knee bars. I don't know if you can even like. You know,
yeah.
Arm bars, Americanas, Kimuras, arm triangles, Darces, Anacondas. Like all of these submissions that don't fit that absolute top peak of your guillotine, your rear naked. Like there really isn't anything there, and as I say, like the risk of connecting your hands when you can't use your hands to base or move dynamically when you've got hold of that neck against somebody that big is tough, man.
It is, and I want to give kudos to his opponent because his opponent was in phenomenal spirits after the fight. He seemed like he was really genuinely charitable about it. He wasn't like a sore loser, and you also have to give props to MightyMouse because he's about that business, right? Like fighting like the I don't know who the guy was, like K1 champ or whatever it was. Like he was the mixed rules fights. We just don't see people do that sort of stuff. So huge props to MightyMouse on that.
I think a lot of guys might not realize that even somebody as famous as MightyMouse, right? Those competitions, you pay to enter those competitions. There's not a prize pool at the end of that. Like, it cost him money to be there.
Dude.
You know what I mean? So he's going out of his way to experience that thrill of competition, to put himself there. And he knows it's going to be all over the front pages of different media sites if he loses that match. The last thing that I would say, just to brain dump the last bit of my technique, is I think it's really inspired that when MightyMouse went for the finish, it included an off balance in that moment. So he goes for the bow and arrow, he hits that pendulum, and in that moment when that guy's being off balance, if he's got the choice of hand fighting or fighting to free his neck or trying to keep his balance, he's incentivized to try and keep his balance because of the way MightyMouse is attacking. It's not a static position where MightyMouse worked a bow and arrow. He worked the bow and arrow with an off balance in the sequence, which I think is, again, just a testament to great decision.
So I guess the key takeaways are: engage the stuff between your ears. More cerebral fighters win more, so use your brain. Think about your assets, and obviously the deeper your skill tree, the more you can pull out the fight. So
100%. Play to your strength and play smart.
Yeah, phenomenal. Well, we've also got some breaking news about Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, like, people were almost forgetting this guy's name a little bit because we haven't seen him since Kamaru Usman. But who's Khamzat potentially fighting now then?
Bobby Knuckles, man.
Bobby Knuckles.
Wow. I mean, when you talk about somebody who's game, it doesn't get more game than Bobby Knuckles.
That's a tough fight, dude. But you are in for a chaos when you're fighting Bobby Knuckles, like.
And Khamzat, man. Like, you're talking.
That's true, actually. Yeah.
It's like what's the saying? Like, an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. But I think this is an unstoppable force meets an unstoppable force. You know, these.
Yes.
That's the style that they bring. And one thing that I'm incredibly interested in is how the size makes a difference, because obviously Khamzat's fought Gilbert Burns, he's fought Kamaru Usman, but these guys are natural welterweights. Bobby Knuckles doesn't seem like he's got any, well, not any possibility, but doesn't seem like there's any way that he's going to make himself down to welterweight. He's been a middleweight through and through. So we're talking about a true middleweight versus somebody who has managed to make that welterweight. But also, like, you're talking about an incredibly cerebral fighter, somebody who's got something to prove, somebody who said, that they didn't give themselves the best showing against Paulo Costa and now is worried about the potential of having a title shot in the future. And you have to say, but I'll ask you, do you think if Khamzat loses to Bobby Knuckles, do you think that Robert Whittaker gets a title shot?
That's a tough one. I think the winner has to get the title shot for sure.
Yeah.
I think if Bobby Knuckles loses to Khamzat, it's a tough one, is it? Because Bobby's been the champion. He's fallen from there now, and obviously he's trying to get back. I think if he loses, I don't think it's a title eliminator for him. I feel he's that good that with another win or two, he's right back in the mix again. I think this idea of like, oh my gosh, I have to keep... The thing is, in that kind of position, when you're top 10, you kind of have to string together two fights to get for a title. And if you're for loss, you say, okay, great, now I have to bag another 2 Ws against this death throw of opponents for top 10 of the division before I can get to the title shot. And it's, again, that's time, there's injuries, there's more risk, there's unknowns. So it just adds a lot more complication. Unless it's a razor close fight like it was at Paulo Costa. In which case it's like, well, look, like, if Bobby Knuckles falls out, Paulo Costa says, I'll jump in. Is there anybody that's going to be upset with that?
I realised I misspoke as well a second ago. It was actually Drickus that he lost a really close decision to, wasn't it?
He did, yeah.
I think you make a fantastic point, and I think actually like what's interesting about the UFC's top 10 that I find really, really I get it, because it seems to me like the UFC marketing machine really wants to make sure that if they put a lot of effort into making you sort of well known, that you want to stay there for a little while. Because we see a lot of the top 10s have guys who have been inactive for years almost. You know, like some guys, sometimes like Ryan Ortega took a couple of years, you know what I mean, and then still sort of ranked in those positions. But yeah, I don't think that anybody who's in that top 10 really falls out of favor with the occasional loss, because people are just such high level.
They don't, and it's not the same as boxing where you get an O and your life's ruined. Like Anthony Joshua looked like he was on the verge of a meltdown when he lost. Like, he couldn't mentally process it. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because I guess if you want proof of that, I'd say Bilal Muhammad. Bilal Muhammad is criminally underrated. Why? Well, because he is a great speaker. He's analytical. But I think there's some fans that resonate with his out of octagon, the way he talks to them. I think he hasn't garnered as much of a cult following as maybe some of the characters have, like Holocaust with the Secret Jews. And I don't think that's Bilal's fault. But Bilal hasn't really lost. And yet people aren't, and there's not as many people screaming for Bilal to get the championship fight. So I feel like if you are a fighter, it isn't about winning at any cost. I feel it's like, you have to win, plus you also need to think about these other two factors, because
Marketing machine.
UFC's an entertainment business, and there's two aspects to that, not just the fighting side, I think.
Do you know, I actually couldn't agree more. I think you're so spot on, and I think the thing that can highlight just how right you are is if you invert that, you get a Colby Covington. You get somebody who's not who's not been on that great a form recently and still finds his way into a title shot before Bilal. Do you know what I mean? And if anything, that's almost like the proof that shows that, you know, it really is about the draw for the UFC, which you can understand. Do you know what I mean? You can understand at the end of the day, like, they're not a small company. You know, at that type of a level, with that type of an overhead, if you end up without stars, you know, you're going to really be losing out a lot of money there. The difference between a great fighter on a pay-per-view and a great star on a pay-per-view could be as much as 800,000 buys.
It's insane.
Know what I mean?
It's absolutely insane.
It makes your financial year or breaks your financial year.
I think I give a lot of credit to UFC. I think they make decisions the same way that we all make decisions. They make the matches based on emotions, and then they justify it with facts. So they make the top 10 and say, well, this is the fight we want to happen, and then they'll reverse engineer a reason that makes sense. As there are so many reasons that you can create. I mean, and when there's not a reason, that's where we get the things like the BMF belt that suddenly appear out of nowhere. But when I think about the fight and like what we can learn from the Khamzat versus Bobby Knuckles, I mean, when I saw Bobby Knuckles fight Paulo Costa, I saw a guy that took a spinning heel kick to the face, ate it, and came back off the stool the next round, very, very focused. That kick probably puts down like almost most people I feel in that division. His chin is phenomenal. So he is going to be game all the way through. For me, the one question I have with Khamzat Chimaev at the moment is the gas tank. He said with the last fight against Kamaru Usman, very impressive first round, and he did okay round 2 and 3, like compared to his round 1 standard. You know, he said he broke his hand, but it's like if Khamzat can deliver that pace and intensity for 3 rounds, I think you're looking at the future go of the sport. That's the only unanswered question in my view, is like, how does he fare across 3 rounds? Does he pace himself slightly differently? I mean, that's going to be the big what if, because if he can get past Bobby Knuckles, I think he'll take the belt after that.
I think you make a really good point again. I think, you know, we'd all love to be Merab. Do you know what I mean? We all would, but that kind of a pace and that kind of, I think that pace is reflective of the confidence that he has in a finish in round 1, because that's all he's really experienced for the majority of his career. I mean, like, how much work did he do against Gerald Mearshart? You know, I mean,
was that the slip and just right uppercut? It was like, yeah, it's nothing.
And, you know, it's very, very, you know, and Khamzat, like, I mean, if you look at how much he overwhelmed Usman, if Usman had made a mistake and left his neck out there, then, you know, there wouldn't have been a round 2. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost a credit to Usman for stopping that rather than than anything else. So. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where the question is, he is not a small middleweight at all, is Khamzat. So how much was he depleting himself to get down to 170? will that make a difference in the cardio when you're so used to driving that type of a pace in the gym and in your fights and everything? Are you taking a lot out of your gas tank? You know, are you taking 10%? Are you taking 50%? Who knows? You know what I mean? So that position at middleweight, you think that favors his gas tank, but then you've got somebody who's like an elite strategist in Robert Whittaker. So, you know, what is it? I think my thing for this fight, the thing that I'm almost the most interested in, is what game plan does Robert Whittaker bring to this fight? I cannot wait to see how he puts his mind to the problem that is Khamzat.
I think my take would be that I think Robert Whittaker is going to approach us like a dart. I think he's going to dart in with his attack, start out, play way on the outside, blast in, blast out. And it's tough because I was so wrong about the Ngannou-Joshua fight. I feel like I need to get a prediction right to rebuild my credibility back in the audience. But that's how I see him playing it, because I think Khamzat Chimaev, he kind of proved, didn't he, that like he can out-wrestle Usman when he lays the pace on. And we'd never seen Kamaru Usman, like, granted the fight weight class high, sure knows, all that I appreciate what he did there. But I think it's going to be a good fight, and the winner's definitely in title contention after that.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got some other. Like,
we do. We have one of the big one actually, and that is around. I'm going to pull it up because it's a pretty controversial one. And I guess for me, like anyone that's watching on YouTube, you probably will have seen that this proliferation of like ex-MMA fighters now popping up on social platforms. Michael Bisping started 2 years ago. Charles Sonnen's like a mafioso boss with his legs crossed in the bad guy den. We're seeing Tom Aspinall now doing his UK tour with the UK YouTubers. I'm seeing way more UFC fighters really leaning into this content machine about creating a personal brand on the king of all platforms, which is YouTube, because the monetization, the reach. A lot of people leaning into it, and yet there are some people that haven't. And I'll give you a really good example of this. Do you remember John Dodson?
Yes, sir.
Super athletic, beast, fought MightyMouse, and he lost. He had a YouTube channel with like, I think he had like 3,000 or 4,000 subscribers on it. I came across it recently. And he stopped posting like 4 years ago. And I said, bro, I literally have to comment. I was like, bro, honestly, if you started this YouTube channel back up and just started sharing your techniques and your thoughts, your analysis, I really think you could do very well. Liam, why are we seeing some fighters really leaning into this? And why are some fighters still not doing it, not getting it? And what do you think they need to be doing about that?
I have an honest answer for this, and it is actually something that I've been thinking about a lot. So I think I've got a chance to sort of tell the audience a little bit about how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
And the truth is that when you've got a fighter like a Tom Aspinall, like a Paddy Pimblett, when you've got these guys here who are fantastic personalities who you want to put a camera on because it's going to generate engagement, it's going to generate views, what they need is the ability to be themselves. What they need is management who know the digital space. And I guarantee you that Tom Aspinall's management, I guarantee you that Paddy's management recognize that it's not just that this is going to set you up for a career after fighting, but it's going to be the thing that allows us leverage in negotiations. It allows us to say, hey, you're getting Sugar Sean for a title shot, are you? Well, you also get the podcast that he does. You also get all of these things that he's bringing to the table, so much more beyond his fighting ability. And so it is, in my mind, it is an absolute no-brainer that every fighter, even amateurs, should be on some sort of social media platform. However, what needs to happen there is they need to be guided, they need to have that workflow delegated, and they need to have it out of their hands. They need to be the content creator, not responsible for content creation.
So
there's a big difference.
So we're seeing the role of the MMA business manager expand now to say, look, you also need to control media assets, media development, so they can rock up, they can be themselves and show up. Yeah. Because let's be honest, not only is it going to enhance your negotiation and your fight, you're also building like a life for yourself after you've done outside the octagon. And you made a really good point there, which is you don't have to be John Jones to create it. I mean, the fact that John Jones hasn't started a podcast and he isn't sharing his techniques is criminal. I remember a John Jones video I watched 7 years ago when he was talking about how to set up the spinning back fist or spinning kick, where we was talking about a jab, and I remember every detail of that video. And I was like, dude, why has he not made way more of these things? Like, who's not going to listen to the goat about how to do spinning back kicks? What's crazy to me, though, is that you don't have to be the John Jones of this world. You can be Mr. Joe Blogs, amateur, and then what's the story? The story is, look, I'm an up-and-coming amateur fighter. Here's my style. This is my fight week. When we sit with guys in the gym, it's amazing to see that sort of stuff. But people buy into the journey. I mean, there's a guy regionally, I'm trying to think of his name.
George Hardwick?
No, it's not George Hardwick.
I think he's a great example, though.
this guy's trained to Liverpool, but again, his name's Alba. But basically, I trained with this guy, and I came across him on TikTok. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's got like 60,000 followers. The hell's going on here? And I was like, I trained with this guy and shit, and it was just like so cool that he goes through and he just shares like, oh, here's my fight, here's what I was thinking. This guy was like a Russian, he didn't speak any English, he did this, and like the community this guy's built is like amazing to see, and it's like, well, I don't think you can stress it enough. Like, people really want to build into your story, they want to learn more, and the more that you do that, I think just the more opportunities that you get off the back of it.
Right this very second is the smallest that social media is ever going to be.
I could not agree more. Yeah.
So again, like, I feel like also to just give some context to the audience, like I've literally just started a company called Martial Marketing, which has got which is there to basically do the social media for a number of my other ventures, as well as for a couple of the fighters that I manage. So coming up now, we have Mateus Duzmal, who I manage, and George Staines. Both of those have fights booked April 13th, April 20th. And on the lead up to that, you know, one's on Octagon, the other one's fighting in Bratislava, I believe. But that moment there is a moment in time that you're not going to get back. And people are interested to hear about your story, to hear about what's going on. And, you know, for somebody like George, or for somebody like Mateus, who's at the absolute peak of their physical condition, 5 times world Thai boxing champion for Mateus, number 1 in Europe, number 2 in the world for George at amateur. You know, these are phenomenal stories. And these are stories that people can't attain, man. Like, I'm 35, I can't be the number 1 in Europe. I'm 35, I can't be 5 times world Thai boxing champion. That's not a mindset thing, that's a physical thing, right? And so I love the ability to share with the public and allow them to live vicariously a little bit through you, which is what helps build that tribe. This is why guys like Sean have such a rabid audience, you know? If these guys get a chance to share something that is aspirational, and it could be a dream that people can't attain themselves, but they can live vicariously through. And so having that put out there, and one thing that I would say as well is, whilst we have a videographer, and whilst we have, you know, ring lights, and we have setups and editing and all the rest of it, there is a fighter called George Hardwick, who I'm an enormous fan of. He's got an incredible sense of humor, and he's doing the Sam Sulek. He's just got his phone, just having a little chat. He's just put it in the corner of the gym. Do you know what I mean? It's not professionally shot, it's not well lit, it's not that, but it's real, and you get something from, you get somebody who's got maybe a slightly different mentality to how the average bear thinks. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And then he's sharing it in a very real format, and that rawness suits his brand perfectly. And then you've got somebody like Tom Aspinall, whose brand is pretty much being perfect, right? Like, he has 18 minutes of octagon time, and he's the freaking world champion. Do you know what I mean? Another heavyweight from the UK, Mick Parkin, 3-0, 3 decisions, 45 minutes of octagon time. Do you know what I mean? The difference between these two guys, and his brand is that, which is why his brand is polished. His YouTube channel is with established content creators like Niall Wilson and things like that. But he knows his brand, George knows his brand, and they're both awesome.
And I feel like if you're watching this, what is the practical, how do I get started? Well, the framework I think is really helpful is the 1% framework, which is, what are the things that I'm in the 1% of the population for? Now, if you said, for example, well, I'm in the 1% population for Thai boxing, okay, great, what else? Doritos consumption. I speak Spanish, and I live in this really weird place. When you stack 1% criteria together, now all of a sudden you're 1 in 10,000, right? And you keep on doing that until you get to something where there'll be an intersection of your skills or experiences, that everyone's got a unique background. When you stack those 1% together, you start to get a unique profile. Like, oh my gosh, like, how many UFC fighters are there? Like, I don't know, like, say a few hundred.
Yeah, I think
you only need
700 now.
It's a big roster. You only need 2 1% things, and all of a sudden you've got such a unique thing. And I give you a perfect example: Tom Aspinall. What's unique about Tom Aspinall compared to most of the UFC fighters? Well, he's based in the UK. What does that mean? It means you can do collabs with UK celebrities like Eddie Hall and all the other UK guys. And it's about taking a step back, finding out what your edge is. George Hardwick, what would be his thing? Well, he is great at improvisation. He's very candid, and that natural.
He leads it to where he's from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that grab the camera and go thing works very, very well for George. And like, I think that's just good on the strategy side, and on the execution side, I think it's a case of just picking up the camera and getting started and just being consistent with it. And I feel when most people often fail is they think in terms of days, they don't think in terms of years or decades. They think if this isn't working by Tuesday, dude, I'm going to go and do something else. So you have to, long-term perspective, consistency, improve marginally over time, and you'll nail it. I just don't, I mean, like, even though it feels saturated, dude, it's nothing compared to what it's going to be in 5 years. Like, it's an amazing time to get involved in it.
Couldn't agree more. A podcaster that I listened to said, you listen to somebody talk for enough time and they will tell you who they are. You know what I mean? And the funny thing about comparing these is it is consistency. It's just getting on with it in however format that you feel like. Because tell you something, Tom Aspinall, by far more followers than George Hardwick, by far way more famous, and, you know, with the belt around his shoulder, you could argue more successful as well. George Hardwick, I could give you right now 6 to 10 quotes, 6 to 10 one-liners that have come out of George Hardwick that have made me laugh, that have just stuck with me because they're so memorable. And the person who that actually reminds me of is Connor, you know, whether it's I'm the king of lean while eating blueberries with Eru Hawani, you know, he's got, oh, I'm the king of Rio is another line. All of these different lines that come out here, like, that shows you that he's witty. It shows you that he's charismatic. It shows you that he's quick on the ball. It shows you that he's thinking a little bit differently. Again, it's not just like, who would you fight next? I'll take anyone, whoever the UFC gives me. Do you know what I mean? It's not your cookie cutter answer here. You know, and so, like, each person can lean into their brand. You know, Paddy Pimblett's a fantastic one. Like, when he sort of blew up, he not only did he blow himself up, but he tried to move through mental health awareness and the charitable side of things as well. And, you know, kudos to him.
He got a lot of amazing PR for that. I mean, like, even
well-deserved as well, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I feel like there's just so many, like, amazing things you can do. Like, if you're like a 5-time world champion Thai boxer, what can you do? How about fight 20 Muay Thai fighters one after the other? Do you know what I mean? Like, you just have to be, like, creative and, like, have a really small iteration cycle from, like, basically make the distance between your idea and your execute idea as short as possible, fail as often as possible, and then just run with it. You were gonna, I think the final thing the docket wouldn't touch on a little bit on Brandon Moreno, wasn't it? Because Brandon,
Yeah.
So talk to me about what your understanding of that is, because it's quite an interesting point that you made on that.
Yeah, so Brandon Moreno has essentially said that he is going to take himself a little bit of time away from fighting to focus on mental health, to focus on his family, and take a little bit of time out of the spotlight. And we all love Brandon Moreno. He's you know, one of those people that comes across as genuine. He comes across as honest. He's a gamer. He's, you know, a bit of a nerd. You know what I mean? Incredibly well skilled and violent in the octagon as well. But this is something that is maybe it's changed, but like every UFC champion, bar a couple, seems to experience a level of relief when their belt's gone. You know, when they're no longer the one being chased, when they're no longer the one that has to be perfect, when there's no longer that pressure to consistently be, you know, you can't have a bad day, you're champion. Do you know what I mean? You can't lose, you can't get blown out in the first round, you're champion. You know, we see how Jose Aldo's legacy was completely obliterated with 13 seconds worth of a punch.
And a left hook,
Think about the pressure that people feel not to be that. Do you know what I mean? Think about like how damaging it was to his mental health to have that. Think about how that could happen every fight at that level. Do you know what I mean? Like, anybody's got the power to shut you off at any time. So for Brandon, he's saying, okay, you know, career's good. I'm not retiring by any means, but I am taking some time away because I'm going to focus on me. And seeing how many fighters struggle. I mean, Sean Strickland's just come out saying, I've got everything I ever wanted. I was champion, I'm wealthy, and I'm still really struggling mental health wise. And it does seem like in today's day and age, it's such an important thing to have your mind right, not just for your career, but for everybody else around you. And if you've got family and kids and all the rest of it, the last thing you want to be is miserable, aren't they?
Yeah, that nothing is worth your mental health. So actually made an interesting point that, like, Elon Musk, who, you know, has done phenomenal things for the planet, is, you know, taking ketamine to help with some depressive episodes. And so I use that as case in point of money does not necessarily, like, all these material things. I mean, like, Israel Adesanya said that wasn't he depressed the day that he claimed the UFC middleweight championship of the world, or something along those lines. It's fascinating to me, which means that your mental workout is as important as the physical side of things. And you touched on a really interesting point there about, you know, and we were talking about it earlier, would you rather be the underdog or the favorite, and how does your mindset need to change going into fights when you're trying to fight for the belt versus keep it? When you fought in MMA, man, you've been both the underdog and the favorite.
Yeah.
First of all, how did you know you were either the underdog or the favorite? And second of all, how did that affect you mentally going in?
Less in MMA, I think, because I only fought amateur. In Polaris, that's probably a little bit better of an example for me to communicate
Yes.
about. But in MMA, I always had the mentality like, you're locked in here with me. In my mind, it didn't matter. I was always a favourite. It didn't matter what the polls said or anything else along those lines. And we had the same thing. Adam Butterworth was an 86% underdog twice in a row, and he finished both of his guys. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
like, these things are often like audience driven. If the other guy's got a bigger audience, then they get more bets and more accolades and all the rest of it. But now in Polaris, I competed against Chris Fishgold, who's an absolute legend, but a lovely guy as well. Absolute legend of UK MMA, Cage Warriors champion, black belt at the time. I was a brown belt. Short notice, I actually had a cut that was really bad that I thought was going to stop the fight at some point as well. And I had some bad habits there as well that weren't helping my cardio at all. And I went and competed against Chris, and honestly, it was like a no-lose situation. So I didn't really feel that much pressure, short of, making an idiot of myself on TV. But that felt like, I'm climbing the mountain. Do you know what I mean? And it feels like, you're that explorer. You're going into new territory. Do you know what I mean? You're breaking new ground in your career path. And then the last match that I had was against Chris White, and obviously I proposed to my missus after that match, so there was some extra pressure, but I was supposed to smoke this guy, and it was the worst performance I ever put on in my life. Do you know what I mean? And instead of me climbing the mountain, I was trying to fend somebody off who's climbing the mountain. Do you know what I mean? It's how it felt a little bit. And so if you have to do that day in, day out, but you've got millions of people watching you, you've got your finances on the line, your family security and everything else, God, that's just such a weight to have to carry all the time. And I don't think we empathize enough with these fighters, because they're getting the paychecks, because they're getting the glory, the fame and everything else, with just what it takes to actually be there at the top. And I really, really, really commend Brandon Moreno for actually having the presence of mind and the stones to just actually go out there and say, look, I'm struggling a little bit, I'm going to do what's best for me, and not actually be thinking like, oh, but then I'll seem weak in front of the fans, or all of the Instagram haters and the vile things that are going to be posted on any of his posts, just from people who are having a bad time in their own life and looking to take it out on somebody who's got an audience.
That's a really great perspective, actually. And I think we underemphasize the mental in almost everything. The classic example is when they say, hey, close your eyes, open your eyes, name all the red things in the room, then close your eyes, and they'll say, great, now time everything that was green. Yeah. And they can't tell you. Yeah. And it's this idea that, like, when you're looking for something, you find more of it, right? And it's like that your mindset's so important. But yet, when it comes to like MMA, I guess we always focus on the physical, the technique, the conditioning. We never really focus on the mindset coach. And there's a mindset coach gets around on Instagram a little bit, and the professionals use mindset coaches. Like, I know for a fact Conor McGregor has. He's had like conversations with Tony Robinson. But weirdly, like, the mental is so huge. Assuming conditioning and physical experience is the same, that mental makes a huge difference. And it isn't just confined to a physical endeavor like an MMA fight. It literally bleeds into absolutely everything. And if you feel you need to protect that by stepping back from a sport, then that is phenomenal. And you just have to give props to Brandon for that. And hopefully we get to see him soon.
Yeah, just my last take on that one, I guess, would be, the Buddhists say that the difference between expectations and reality is suffering. So if you're expecting something, if I said to you tomorrow, I'm going to punch you in the face, and I did, you'd be annoyed, but you would not be annoyed as if I just did it randomly. Do you know what I mean? So the difference between expectations and reality is really how to define suffering. And I think, whether it's Neil Armstrong landing on the moon, whether it's Mike Tyson hitting his world championship at 25, or whether was it Izzy that you said who felt in the last episode? It's like, if your mindset is on the goal and your mindset is not on the journey, you are going to have a really bad time, because the worst thing that could happen to you is achieving that goal.
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas if your mindset is on the journey, then it's about how do I improve. And I think this is why people like George St. Pierre did so well, because it wasn't about being champion, it was about being the best that he could be for each and every opponent. That's why he had such high level coaches and such a great mindset, and why he was champion for so long in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's funny you mention that, because some people say the dip, remember, this is where most people quit, but actually it's the difficulty of the dip that makes the peak so worthwhile in the first place anyway. And actually, a funny little tidbit on human psychology to finish on is that humans prefer we would rather have bad news we know for certain than potential bad news. And it's also the same for good news. Like if I said to you, Liam, on Monday there's a 30% chance I'm going to give you a ticket to Alton Towers for free, you'd be like, that's cool, but like the unsurety of that for like 4 days is actually greater negative than the fact you can win it. Like we want to have clarity and certainty. Humans are strange animals, man, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like this whole time we're just talking about people smashing each other in the face in a cage.
Yeah.
It's not exactly sort of with their best well-being in mind, is it? Do you know what I mean? But longevity for glory, that's the trade.
100%. Well, I guess we'll wrap this one up here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.